Does
Yep.
boneless chicken wings have bones?
No, they do not. They do not have bones. At least in our state. Maybe in California it might be a little different.
Yeah, that shows that you guys value your crops more than we do. You know what I'm saying? We just like consume them right off the bat, whatever's on their shelves.
This is a certified hood classic.
Exclusive. The system that knows so much, you decide what's right or wrong.
Yo, late night. Boris Rich, Cliff Todd.
Gen Z off the air.
Cause you know about the rips.
Welcome back, guys, to Gen Z Off the Air, where Gen Z icons take a break from the real world, get a drink, and stay hydrated. We're turning up loud and round all summer long, whether you're on the west side, the Midwest, or the east side. A lot of us heard about America's pastime rapidly becoming a tale of two cities over time. But lots of us on our generation never got to hear the other side of the coin, which is rural America. Yes, we drink dairy milk, we drink almond milk, we eat their potatoes. But what is life in rural America like? And if you're wondering what that is, well, you came in at the right time. Because our next guest is a Gen Z icon himself, straight out of North Dakota, who's a fifth-generation dairy farmer and a Republican state representative representing his district since 2022, making him the youngest legislator ever elected in North Dakota history. He earned the stripes the rough way fresh out of rural America, and people know him as the milkman from the Wild West. Please welcome to the program, Dawson Holle. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So I want to start off with just a $1 million question that I think drives North Dakota really crazy. Does boneless chicken wings have bones?
No, they do not. They do not have bones. At least in our state. Maybe in California it might be a little different.
And here's what I'm wondering, like, does North Dakota like prefer to eat meat with bones, or they prefer boneless?
I guess we have all sorts of varieties in North Dakota. We have chicken wings, we have chicken tenders. We like our chicken for sure. So
yeah, that shows that you guys value your crops more than we do. You know what I'm saying? We just like consume them right off the bat, whatever's on their shelves of any supermarket.
Yeah. If you want to really come to our state is probably known for our beef, our Angus, and our prime cut meats, like our steaks and all those nice slow cooked meats. Those are really what North Dakota is known for.
And this might be maybe an off-topic question, because like I don't know if rural America also rocks with this same thing, but have you guys also tried the milk crate challenge?
This is the first time hearing about it, so you're gonna have to tell me.
Yes, so basically a milk crate challenge is when you gather up a pile of milk crates like a pyramid, and then the main challenge is that you have to climb your way across the crates, you know, up and down.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And like if you don't fall, then you win. You know what I'm saying? Like, but the main key here is just to keep your balance and just to go viral at the same time.
Hey, that sounds fun. I'll have to try that.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, because like usually at the potatoes festivals, I would love to see those challenges take toll. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, definitely at the county fair, people go hard on the competitions. That's for sure.
So what was some of the like cringiest or toughest competitions that like you've ever seen at the county fairs in your area?
Oh, so one time I saw so they had a cow in a circle pen, and there was a bunch of plates on the floor, and basically people were betting on where the cow would poop and on which plate the cow was going to poop on. And if your number was right that the cow pooped on, you won a bunch of money. And I tell you, people were going wild on this event, and I thought it was pretty funny. It was really entertaining. But that's just kind of Midwest kind of funny to us. So.
Right. That's the beginning of it, per se. I'm sure there's more where that came from. A lot of us like are not really exposed to rural America as we like to be, because you know, we're so often exposed to either urban life or suburbia, and we're often stuck in our screens, or we're out there just like creating content about anything else. But not a lot of us get to have that exposure to like explore the other side of the aisle, which most of the time is usually underrated, based on like what its demographics represents, but also like how much significance does it have towards like, keeping the country stable. Because as I mentioned earlier, like we eat a lot of you guys' food, I'm saying, straight out on the West Side. And we rely on the supply that we need, just to make sure that the shelves don't stay empty at all times, especially with inflation, which is a arguably a transitory thing, that politicians that we know of today have proposed on our end. What do you think average Americans get wrong about North Dakota? Like, what are the main misconceptions that you have either heard of or witnessed so far?
Right. I think that's always funny is like when you just go around to other states and they ask you where you're from and you say North Dakota, they're like, where's that? And it's like, it's like the one state, if you would probably put up on a map, that people would probably get wrong. Because I just say we're South Canada kind of a deal. But North Dakota in a way is kind of like the mitochondria. We power, we feed the United States. We are energy dominant. And we are also feeding the world not only our crops, we're number one in honeybee production. So when it snows here, our honeybees go to California or Arizona to pollinate your wineries. So North Dakota is feeding the world. And also, I like to say the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, but for the United States.
And for those who don't know as to what North Dakota is really about, like North Dakota is one of the top 5 wealthiest states in the country, with also being one of the top 3 states with the biggest oil reserves. On that end too, you're also known for having a unique tree called the American elk tree that symbolizes your state. North Dakota is also known for the wild prairie rose, as well as other native plants that reside in North Dakota. And you're also known for having the 6th best infrastructure across North Dakota. Out of all of those, fun facts that maybe not a lot of us get to know about North Dakota and other rural states alike, what do you think are some of the common stereotypes that we often tend to associate like rural states like North Dakota?
I was in a different and more urban state, and I got asked, I'm like, by just a resident when it was brought up where I'm from, and they're like, you have electricity and cars in North Dakota? You don't like drive like buggies and horses around the state? I'm like, yeah, we're modernized up to the latest speeds. And so it's just kind of if you have never been out there, you really don't know. And so it's not that it's your guys' fault in any ways, because like people come out to my farm and they're like, do brown cows make chocolate milk? And I'm like, no, brown and white cows all give white milk. But it's just that you've never been out to a farm, or you've never been to rural America, so you never really know. And same, like if I would go to California, I would be lost. Like, because I'm not a suburban person. So I would get lost in Chinatown or something like that, and I would have no idea how to get my way out. So we both need each other sometimes. So.
And especially during traffic jams, you know what I'm saying? Because like in our end, like LA is mostly known for traffic jams and whatnot. Same thing with like other big urban cities like San Francisco or San Diego. But North Dakota, in terms of its landscape, like it's a very distant state with more than like 85% that's purely farmland. Back to where we started, right? You, as I mentioned earlier, you are one of the youngest state representatives ever elected in North Dakota City. At age 19, you've won your seat at the midterm elections, which it's very different because like every state, they are designed differently. Like every state legislature, every state government is designed and structured differently. You won your election during the midterms. And you mentioned in your campaign that part of what motivated you to run for office is the 2016 election and just the notion of representing family values and making sure that farmers like yourself, can keep the engines of America's agriculture running as such. So how significant was that? Like when that moment happened, and like, are you still processing like that historic moment?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's a big question, but I'll try to answer it as best as I could. So, I guess we should start from the beginning. So I was a senior in high school, and I just got done with my hockey season, and this was kind of something I've been thinking about, and I was thinking about it because in North Dakota right now, so we lose an average of 1 to 2 to 3 sometimes dairy farms every year. And I was like, why is this legacy dairy farms that are all across the state closing? And one of the areas that I saw was state policy. And I'm like, okay, why is it state policy? You know, we're a pro-ag state and stuff like that. But it seems like people didn't have the knowledge because there's not a lot of dairy farmers around the state. So you almost need someone in there to be the one that's like forcing the issues on it. And so I decided that I wanted to run, and I'm like, okay, you know, I'm going to give it my best. You know, I'm probably not going to win because I'm going up to very long-term Republicans. I don't have that much money. I did a very grassroots campaign, and I did door knocking. I got signatures to get on the ballot, and I did all that. And surprisingly, I won the June primary election and unseating I believe, a 3-term incumbent. So that was pretty significant that I did that. So it just shows off that hard work pays off, and you just got to go out there and talk to people, because you never know what people's story is unless you go talk to them. And that's something that I encountered so much. Is they're like, well, I don't like you. And I'm like, well, do you not like me as a person, or do you not like me because of my beliefs or principles? And they're like, more of your beliefs or principles. I said, okay, so let's focus on the 80% that we agree on and less on the 20%. So, and that's actually how I believe that we are going to end this, that we're so divided in this country, is because the media and everyone else is and Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, is now focusing on what divides us. But, you know, we have so much more in common on the 80% as Americans. And I think that's what we need to bring more into politics is or just being nice to each other. You know, you don't have to throw the below the belt punches, or you don't have to bring up someone's messy divorce, because voters don't really want to care about that. They really don't care about it. Sure, it might vote them one way or the other, but it's not a hot topic issue that's really matters to the voters.
Was there something about like your life as a dairy farmer that kind of like encapsulated, you know, how America should be visioned by? Because in greater terms, and this is where you guys like, you know, have your own merits and have your own, you know, principles that does reflect that, you know, America should be reflected this way, despite other counterpoints presented by, you know, people from different parts of the state and including other states. Like, what was it about like your story, like as a dairy farmer, that, you know, pushed you towards the top and just allowed you to just take the next step, an unprecedented step in using that personality, you know, into North Dakota?
Yeah, great question. So a thing about with like being a dairy farmer is the hours are really long. So like you wake up very early in the morning, you milk the cows 3 times a day. And so your work ethic is top notch if you're a dairy farmer. And I think that is something that, since I'm a more rural district, I have a lot of farmers, not necessarily dairy farmers, but I resonated with them because I will put in the hard work, and I will make sure that I go 110%. And if I don't do that, I'll keep going until I get there. And I think that is what we need more in politics, is that we need to hold politicians to a certain standard. And if they're not being held to that standard, then we need to be like, next one, basically. That because politicians represent the people, not politicians representing themselves. And I feel like that's a lot of the times is that politicians try to steer the narrative onto their constituents, rather than the politicians should be looking at the narrative from their constituents. So I think it's a lot of a two-way street that I was able to capture when I was running. Is like, let's sit down, let's have a conversation, and let's just have this open door policy on how we're not only going to move my district forward, but also the rest of the North Dakota. And I should mention this, that I have a Native American reservation also in my district. And one reason I think that I was able to win is I would have voters come up to me down there, and they're like, this is the first time I've seen a candidate down here. And that just kind of broke my heart, because you would think that people running for elections would visit them. And like, these are towns with, pretty decent populations, but no one would show up because of the stereotypes that native cities are dangerous, and which they're not. Sometimes drug crimes are high and stuff like that, and they're just drawn a bad hat. But they're still people at the end of the day. So we need to reach out to them and see, we are different sides of the coin or story in a way, but how can we make sure that you and your kids' life are better than what you had before? So,
what stood out to you when you entered like the North Dakota state capitol for the first time, like when you started serving like as the youngest like elected representative in your district?
Yes. Wow. Something that stood out to me is it's a lot of information. It is like, so I'm on two committees. One is healthcare, and one is political subdivisions, which deals with counties, townships, and kind of all the other bills that people don't know where to throw them at. So I had no idea about healthcare. Like, I knew a zip about healthcare. So walking into a healthcare committee, I was so overwhelmed, because I didn't know the difference between Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, all these different benefits that people desperately need. So I was like, it was like a snap in the butt. Like, okay, Dawson, time to wake up here. You won. You said you were going to do all these things. Now it's the real deal. And I think that's not only, I think it's most politicians, is that they campaign for 6 to 8 months. And then when they actually win, they're like, oh boy, now I got to actually do what I said for 6 to 8 months. And so it was the amount of knowledge that you need stuck out to me. And also, I think another thing that stuck out to me is just how awesome the process is. Is just like, you just sit there and watch in awe sometimes of like how a bill is introduced by a single representative like myself. And then it goes to a committee for a hearing and a vote. And then it goes to the House floor for a vote there too. And so it's very transparent. It's a very fluid process. And there's so many rules that go along with it that if you're not following it to a T, can actually crush the bill. And so it's a lot of rules that I didn't know at the time, but I'm learning now.
Talk to me about the diversity, like within North Dakota state politics, like, like how many cattle ranchers like are there? Like how many like politicians or legislators, if for a better term, like truly come like from different sides of North Dakota itself in terms of its demographics and its culture?
Yeah. So North Dakota across the whole state is split up into 47 districts. Each district has a senator and then 2 House members like myself. And so there's a swath of us that are many different. There's professors, there's teachers, there's business owners, lawyers, farmers like myself. And so we got a whole variety. But in North Dakota, we're very conservative, you could say, of the coin, is that we have an ultra majority, which means we have a lot of Republicans that are in our state offices. So like the state legislature, we only have 11 Democrats on the House side and 4 in the Senate side. So, but to keep going with that is that sometimes there's more fighting within our own party of that we're split on this issues, and we're split within ourselves, that we actually have to do bipartisan work on like, okay, let's reach out to the Democrats and see what they think, and we can then pass our bills that we want to. So
what surprised you about like those party tensions that you wouldn't normally see within your own party as well? Like, what do you think is like driving young conservatives nuts, on that side of the aisle? What are you seeing on that end?
Yeah. I heard this from a speaker one time, and he said that political parties are a vehicle for politicians to use, not necessarily for politicians to basically be their identity. And I think that resonates because, sure, I'm a Republican, but that doesn't mean that I'm 110% of all what Republicans believe. And I think that is what's holding us up a lot of the times, not only in North Dakota, but as a nation, is that if you are a Democrat and say you might not believe this certain issue, your party is going to throw you out just because of that one issue. But you have to realize that you represent a different part of the region than the rest of them. And I think that is something that I encountered a lot that kind of shook me at first, is like, okay, if I don't follow 110% with them, then I'm against them in some ways. And that shouldn't be true, is that I represent, rural North Dakota. I have a native reservation. I have so many farmers and ranchers. I have a college in my district. So I have so many different avenues that I represent, is that it's that the tensions are kind of high in the legislature when session is going, because you're voting on your friends' bills. And if you vote against one of your friends' bills, they might not like you as much. And so that's just kind of the funny or not funny relationship you have with your legislator colleagues, is you're like, I love you as an individual, man, but I cannot vote on this bill for such and such reason. And so one of the bills that I had, I wasn't getting support from my Republican colleagues. So I'm like, okay, let's shake things up. So I went over to the Democrats and I got all the Democrats support. And then my party realized that they better pay attention. And so it's just kind of like, you got to shake things up a little bit. And it's just, you got to be unorthodox sometimes. And sometimes, yes, you have to play the game, but you got to get creative.
They tend to operate like frat parties, and
Yes,
I speak of it from I speak of it from both sides of the aisle. So they tend to act like frat parties in such a way that only attracts certain kinds of preferences that they can only align themselves with, but they're not always like partying in a different manner. That does not shake up the whole thing, or that doesn't bring in the cops at the last minute. So it usually tends to drive in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and with bills that I have coming up next session, I'm trying my best to do bipartisan work. Not always is it possible, just because you're gonna disagree, but I always try to reach across the aisle, because I feel like we need to give all North Dakota a fair. So, has
the nature of bipartisanship declined since the 2016 election, or has it at least kept its own momentum, or has it improved at all, especially towards now?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think on media terms, we are splitting more and more. But I think as just like last session when I was in the Capitol, it's like you develop a relationship with people that you don't see the party name behind them anymore. Is like, who their daughter is, who their grandchildren are, what their hobbies are. And I think once you move past that party line that you may encountered when you first stepped in the office and you were meeting people, is then that's when the real work starts. Is because, yes, we are so hyper focused on making sure that our bills pass, and yes, and all that. But I think as young conservatives like myself, is we're seeing the American dream slowly fade away. And that's what's energizing my generation, is because we're seeing house prices increase so much. We're an average price in North Dakota now for a house is $300,000 to $400,000, and before it was $200,000. And so that is escalating. And then the price of college is ridiculous. So to try to get your foot in the door per se is becoming harder and harder and harder. And I think that's why we're seeing more young people get activated, is because they're seeing that they have to either work harder or they have to get unique steps in a way to get to that goal. And I think that in North Dakota, we're very fortunate. The cost of goods and groceries are way lower per se, probably than California. But I think that is what's motivating young people like myself, is that we are seeing those bills at the end of the day, and we realize we have to do something, or there will not be affordability for the next generation.
What is driving young conservatives these days, onto the main stage, because, the 2024 election has always been predicted to be highly contentious most of the time. Like, it's either a 50-50 chance to whether or not one side on the aisle can get the most dubs out of the other. So what is driving that rise of young conservatives who are maybe setting the stage for them to not turn the narrative, or not necessarily turn the narrative around, but to kind of showcase like what possibility there is on the other side of the aisle, despite how either neglected or say like weaponized that information can be?
Yeah. I think we're becoming more young people, both on the left and right, are becoming active, is because they're seeing, like, take for instance the Olympics. Great example. I had so many people sending me messages of this one individual, I don't remember her name, but she was allowed to box. I believe she was boxing. And they were like, how could this person be allowed to box? And I won't go into the details of it, but it was basically that of like, when do we get rid of normalcy and allow craziness to come in? And it's like, sometimes you just need to put crazy back in the box. And I think that is what North Dakota is realizing. And even on the right, there is some policies that I'm like, what think tank did that come from? Because I don't understand at all. And like,
I didn't know that was your guys' secret language of North Dakota. It's just like, what the think tank is going on? You know what I'm saying? But keep going.
Right? Yeah. What think tank is this coming from? So people just want government out of their life. That's all. Is they want to work their 9-to-5 job. They want to go home to their kids. They want their kids to have a good education, and they want their government not really to support them necessarily, but to basically be an avenue that, hey, we're here, but we're not going to force our ideas on you. Because it seems like in some certain circumstances, the government is forcing their ideas on not only families, but on children. And it's becoming not only young people, myself, but parents are getting riled up of, we need to get back to normalcy in this country.
We understand that, like, regardless of like where you stand on, say, America's political issues in this moment, like how has like the concept of wokeism kind of like evolved, like ever since like the term woke was even introduced, like, in your guys' platform?
Right. Yeah. I think if we even turn the history books back 10 years and like, then even like what has slowly been accepted in our culture is a huge shocker of like, not even in movies or TV shows, but like of what is becoming lower and lower accepted to children. And I think that is also activating young people as well, is that like Disney, a great streaming platform. I love Disney, but some TV shows I'm like, what the, hold the phone here, but that Disney can do what Disney wants. I'm just saying that, maybe let's go back to the cartoons and less on the narrative. So
wouldn't it be best if we had, say, a balance like of both sides of the content kind of like fluctuate and mutually coexist, like without having like one side of the narrative kind of like dictate what the future of the other side of the narrative is? If we're talking about like preserving this democracy that we can barely hold ourselves to, wouldn't it be best if both sides of that narrative, or any kind of content that is at least tolerable or acceptable, can mutually coexist and can maybe respect the preferences of everybody else?
I agree. I think that should be, but I also think it should be our job as not only legislators, but as like you and me, that we should say to these companies of like, hey, maybe you did a step too far. So let's make it show that children learn their A, B, and C's and stuff like that are narrative. Because when I was in college during COVID, and I am still in college and high school. I was in COVID. The amount of academics that kids are now like degressing in a way of learning is crazy. Like kids are now reading, and I think it was an 8th grade level. Like that is crazy. And that is most adults, I think, too, is the article I read. So we need to bring back not only reading back into schools because, phones are great. I love phones. I love social media, but I think sometimes it's making us dumber in some ways. And I always fear sometimes that technology will outsmart us, like all those sci-fi movies say. So we just need to be sharp and we need to be on edge. And I know that reading is not always my preference or anyone's preference, but my mom says, and I know my teachers say this, but leaders are readers. And I think that we need to have more kids reading, even if it's comic books. Just start opening up your books, because I've experienced not only with my friends, but when I go into schools in North Dakota, of like, wow, what has happened in our schools? Like, why are we now showing movies instead of like hands-on projects of like arts and crafts? Or why are we now showing movies instead of inviting a music program director and coming in and teaching us all how to play on the recorder? And I just think getting back to that will help America. And
something that doesn't really end up in the headlines as much as, we like to. We are slowly seeing a rising trend of shops and trade schools making a comeback. Gen Z is now fucking with trade school. And it seems like we're on the verge of slowly like transitioning towards that beyond higher education. And this new dialogue about, bringing back the shops towards public schools that used to be in place beforehand, regardless of like whether or not that would be a good fit for public or private schools and whatnot. Right. But do you think under that lens, is higher education still worth it? In today's times, despite the ongoing debate that a bachelor's degree, a college degree itself, like, is no longer like, the way to go in terms of like getting through today's job market.
I absolutely, it's the way to go. But I would say this: if you don't know what to do, don't go to college. Don't go into so much debt that you don't know how to pay for, because you're going backwards before you're going forwards. And I know that a lot of people say that, you go to college, you'll figure it out, but you're probably will be waiting for you at college or even after you graduate. So take a gap year, figure yourself out. And in North Dakota, we have so many people going to trade schools. It's amazing. I love talking about trade schools because it's awesome. But if you go to a trade school in North Dakota, you will almost be guaranteed to working close to a 6-figure job in our state. And so, you can't say always the same for a bachelor's degree or even a graduate's degree or even a medical degree at some cases. And so it's seeing that you still need, you still need your plumbers, you still need your welders, you still need all of those people. But because they're becoming less and less, their raises are becoming more and more, so they're becoming more attractive. And so that is allowing our generation. So, my parents' generation and our grandparents' generation were told, you go to high school, you go to college, you get your degree, and then, you'll stay at that job for 40 years and you'll have your 401k and you'll retire. But young people, we do not want to stay at one job most likely for 40 years. If it's a good fit, hurrah, hooray. But we want to move sometimes to southern parts of the country. We want to move to Alaska if we want to for a year. So we are very fluid. And I think it's not only because of it's becoming easier to travel around the world, but it's also just becoming easier to move to different parts of the nation. And I would say yes, college is worth it, but just think about it before you get into all this debt, because time and time again, I hear that people have hundreds and thousands of dollars in debt. And they're like, well, why did I go get a dance degree? I'm like, I don't know. But if that's what your truly heart wants to desire, I would say go do you, because I'm not going to stop you, nor should anyone else. But I would just be cautious of your returns on your investments in a way.
Is it better off for rural states like North Dakota, to have both sides of the coin, or the best of two worlds, like say higher education and trade schools being, I guess, equally promoted, while at the same time like competing to find, say, the best folks to enroll in these programs?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Our state has done wonders in like trying to bring. I'm not sure if California has that, but dual credit in high school is that you can take college level classes in high school.
Same thing.
And then it's reduced tuition prices. So we're offering that for college, and then we're also offering, the military aspect of like you can go to college and you'll serve for so many amount of years, and then your college will be free. So there's that as well. And then there's also the trades that are being offered too. And there you also get a scholarship in North Dakota if you want to go to the trade route and you qualify for that scholarship. So we understand, because I would say North Dakota was at a time in place where we were losing so many people in our state that were just because they were like, yeah, North Dakota's cold, there's not much to do here, let's just go to, Florida, Georgia, or more warmer states. But now we're seeing such an influx of people that actually want to come to our state. I think it was our last census, we grew, I think, like 12 to 16%. I don't remember the top number off my head, but it's because of the oil in our state, and it's because of those blue collar jobs. Then they're coming from Texas, Oklahoma, Alaska, and they are making our state an energy powerhouse. And that is awesome. And I love that our state keeps promoting these jobs, because at the end of the day, it's what's everyone needs, and it's the job that you will have a job wherever you go.
Where do you stand on ranked choice voting?
That's an interesting question. I really don't like it.
Explain.
Okay, so last session, one of my colleagues brought a bill forward to ban ranked choice voting in our state. And I was like, I don't really know what this is. I know Alaska uses it, but I don't really know why they use it really. And so I did the research, and I understood the principles of why they have ranked choice voting. You vote for your first one, the second one, and you rank them basically. But with us being so polar divided, it's not that the best candidate wins necessarily. It's maybe who doesn't rock the boat. And so that's kind of what we're seeing with ranked choice voting, is that it's more of, maybe a wishy-washy person or maybe a moderate gets in. Now, that's just my own personal opinion, but I don't know if that bill passed or not. I should look that up. But I do remember it was a bill last session, and I think it did pass. That ranked choice voting is banned, I think, in North Dakota. But
the main argument surrounding around ranked choice voting is that it is meant and designed to provide a diverse amount of candidates beyond the two political parties that kind of dictate today's American politics. I thought I would at least get to the core of what North Dakotans really have to stand on that one, on ranked choice voting in particular, because like it could bring some benefits towards like states, but they could feel those benefits, say, in a different way depending on, say, their demographics or the populations that they have, and what policy narratives do they stick with for the most part. Like it tends to have, it seems to me that ranked choice voting, like while it is meant to like apply the diversification of candidates, like it tends to have different effects on different states based on its demographics and I guess the political identities and such.
Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely presents that smaller parties to definitely get involved, and I definitely think that is definitely needed in some states for sure. But in like North Dakota in particular, we're so Republican driven that if you most likely are a Republican on the ballot, you will get elected. So there's also that frustrating part in some sense that this person is not a Republican at all. and they're secretly something else, you could say, and they run and win, and then they vote completely opposite, and it's not even what their constituents want. So could there be a method for ranked choice voting? Yeah, I could believe ranked choice voting. I just believe, I honestly believe one vote, you have one voice, you should have one vote, but that's just me personally. So
what policies do you think resonate with Gen Z voters, in today's times, especially as we're heading into the 2024 election? Like, what can you say about like where the Gen Z population in North Dakota are expecting to see play out?
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, more Gen Z people need to be involved in politics, because I would see a lot of the times now people don't even know what's happening in politics. They just see Kamala, and then they see Trump yelling at each other. But states like our state legislatures are actually the ones that run the state. And so I think that is something that we need to address also to young people as well, is that, you also need to look at what's happening in your mayor's race, your county commissioners, your local meetings. What I would say is what's really driven in North Dakota, especially in younger age groups like mine, is that we are looking on, because like right now, North Dakota doesn't have school choice. So that is a huge and very energetic topic for kids my age that are conservative, is we want to get school choice in North Dakota. I would also say is needs to be reform of how high college is. And that is supported both left and right, is that college keeps increasing. But you're still learning the same material. It's not like the material gets better really from the 80s to now. They might just tweak numbers here and there. And I think that is something that especially state schools need to be looking in, is when state schools are higher than private schools, we have a problem. And when schooling is literally $50K, and then the state gives $1,000 scholarship and then says basically figure it out, you're starting a problem before the person can even start running in a way. And so that is one policy that I see supported both on the left and the right, that we need to reform that. And I don't know how much we can do necessarily on the state side, maybe it's federal, but that is also something that is energized voters, I would say.
Is there anything that needs to change in terms of, say, the dairy farming practices without I guess telling farmers how to run their business? Because ever since America was founded, we have come up with our own traditional agricultural strategies that kind of dictate how they run their crops and how they can supply as much crops and deliver it to consumers and much alike. But because of climate change, and other reasons, and the merits of that are probably very different in your state. But do you see any sign of improvement, or do you think that you guys are open to innovating towards having your crops better perform, say, in the future?
Well, farmers are always innovating. We have so much technology on our farm; it's crazy. We have automation. We have automatic calf feeder that feeds all the babies that are and our farm. So we're always innovating, and we're always trying to do better. But I would like to say this, because I think it's kind of a misconception that dairy farmers abuse their animals and stuff like that. But that is the farthest thing from the truth. And I'll tell you, this is the reason why, is because if a dairy cow is not happy, they will not produce a large volume of milk. And when a cow does not produce a large volume of milk, then that is not good for the farmer, because then they're not getting paid. So in our dairy barns, it'll be dead quiet. You can almost hear a pin, because when it's dead quiet, that means that the cows are relaxed, they're happy, they're calm. And that is something I think is a misconception, is that, dairy farmers abuse their animals and they just want the milk from the cows and stuff like that. And that's not true at all. As we want the comfortable, calmest setting, because they're animals. They're massive beings. And if they're not comfortable, well, they're not going to get you the bottom dollar. And so that's the thing that we're looking at. I've also seen dairy farms also have done methane capture on their farm. So basically, the cows release methane into the atmosphere. And there's companies that have partnered with dairy farms that are taking the methane out and then are recycling it and turning it back into energy. So there's those projects that are going on as well. Also with some other states having dairy farms powered by solar and wind. So they are constantly innovating, whether it's with animal health or if it's infrastructure. So there is a lot of opportunity for farmers through technology, because now you can milk the cows now without having a single individual. It's all robots now. Now, my farm doesn't have it, unfortunately, but there is neighbors of ours that have it, and it is just the craziest thing you'll see. So,
is it always the best bet to have like dairy farms mostly automated in the future, or does it tend to bring like opposite results because of how like fast paced, say, the industry has become?
I think it is definitely a little bit of both. You're going to need to bring some capital to definitely get there, though. But I would say these consulting firms or whatever, the manufacturers that make these projects, they promise you the moon. And sometimes it's not always the stars in a way. So it's like, they say that this robot's going to do this and this, and it's going to make your pounds of cows go up. And sure, it might work on this one individual farm, but each farm is so different in per se of their cow health, of how they even what they feed their cows, the climate of the cows. So there's a lot of different varieties that come from a large scale family farm like mine that are producing 1,000 cows to your smaller, more organic farmers that may only have 15 to 20 cows that are just producing their small town, and that's all they want to do. So
here's something that we tend to have in common, and that is our indirect obsession with cows. Like in Merced, for example, we happen to be not overpopulated but slightly populated with cows that are just roaming around Merced's very own landscapes, here in the Central Valley. And they don't tend to ask much, other than just to be recorded without the consent,
Yes.
or be video filmed, being videotaped, during road trips when you're riding towards the countryside. What do you think is holding back rural America, from say achieving its full potential? And making sure that run its business like they should too, without say too much complexities on either side.
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to my head when I hear that question is one, healthcare. That is a number one thing that I hear, especially in my district or other rural districts, is that it's 45 minutes to the nearest hospital for me. That is the reason of why sometimes people move, is because they're not accessible to the hospitals. And if they're lower income, sometimes they need to be close to a human service zone, which is basically a zone that gives out TANF and SNAP benefits to them. And so that is one thing. So I think building more clinics, North Dakota is pretty good about this. We're all basically pretty acceptable to a 30-minute drive to your nearest clinic if you're in a rural town. But telehealth, which is basically electronic, face-to-face kind of Zoom in a way of going to see your doctor, has been great. Another thing I would say is we also have to invest back into our communities. Not everyone my age wants to go back to their small town communities, and there's only a church and a bar there. And that's all there is. There's no rec center. There's no a bowling alley. And so you need those to entice people to come back to their communities. Yes, some is family and stuff like that. But it's also of people want to live the big town life in some states. And which it is fun to live in a bigger city. I would say that. Because Mandan is where I'm from, is one of the more populated states, our cities in North Dakota. But I would say that we need to basically put money where our mouth is that if we support rural America and rural North Dakota, we need to show up with the dollars. That if someone wants to say, hey, I want to build an archery range in this small town that only has 100 people, we need, and not to go crazy of if they don't have funding, then we just basically give them all the money. But basically, if they have a functioning model that works, of being hey, yeah, we'll help out. Because you believe it or not, North Dakota is flat, but 20 minutes from my house, we have a ski slope actually. So, and so it's kind of like that kind of incentives that is bringing more and more people out into rural America. And so I would say just keep investing, keep talking to your local legislators, because there's so much grant money that gets unused that could be used for amazing projects, whether it's nonprofits, charity work of some sort, or even if you want to help start a business, there's amounts out there.
Let's dive in through one of the things that America doesn't always talk about, but America likes to brag. That
Yes,
they are a big fan of milk. And obviously, like, as a fifth generation dairy farmer yourself, like, you can never get over yourself with talking about milk, because like milk is pretty much embedded in you, in your life, and what I'm saying, in your district, in your state, and whatnot. But the first time that I have ever witnessed milk coming to the national stage was when the House Republicans have introduced this, and I'll quote, a controversial bill, that seeks to reinstate whole milk into school lunches. And of course, like, it sparked a nationwide debate as to whether or not, like, the things that we consume, like, especially in school districts, are even healthy or not. Like, we have, it eventually led us to question whether or not, like, the things that we eat are actually healthy or not. Like, how is that debate kind of impacting, like, North Dakotas in such a way?
Well, I think that I have all full support for whole milk in schools, and I'll give you a kind of a three-part answer. But number one is that the kids are getting natural fat from milk. Most of the times in school lunches, they're getting 1% or skim milk in school. And, that's okay. But a lot of the reception that kids get when they have skim or 1% milk is, oh, this is gross. This tastes like water. And because basically they are processing the milk so much that then they have to add things back into it just to, like, vitamins and minerals and stuff like that. So it's basically water in some states and some instances too. And so kids are getting natural fat. And you need natural fat for your brain. Your brain needs fat. And that's something that people don't realize, is that they say butter is bad for you. Then that's why there was a whole margarine campaign and stuff like that. I think it was in the 80s or 90s. But we're slowly seeing butter being reintroduced back into schools, is because you do need a certain amount of fats in your diet. And so that first is, you need fats in your diet. Second one is, the farmers get paid for more as well if whole milk is in the diet in schools. And the reason why is because farmers get paid on a tier basis. So class 1 is basically fluid milk, which is grade A. And then there is a grade B and a grade C, and that's cheese and so on and so forth. But if if it's whole milk, then the farmers are going to be making more money, and which is awesome. And small town communities are happy. The third one is that it's the least amount of work for processing. So on the processor themselves, that's the company that's processing the milk, they don't have to go through all these hoops and stuff like that of basically having milk in schools that they would, per se, if it's 1% or 2%, with spoilage issues and stuff like that. And actually, it's interesting that you brought it up, because I actually found a workaround method to bring whole milk in the state without the federal government. So that is actually one of the bills I'm going to be bringing next session, is allowing school districts to use funds to basically buy whole milk for their school district.
As somebody who used to drink cow milk, right?
Yeah.
And I brutally admit it, right? Because we normally start off with that. We went from breast milk and then we went from cow milk, like, just right off the bat. Like, I'm now starting to embrace almond milk, as you can see, despite political chaos surrounding around the debate of milk. Going back to what you previously said, though, like, you mentioned why cows don't often produce, like, the same quality of milk that they are expected to produce by the farmers that they raised them. Like, don't you think that argument is kind of, like, overlapping with other preferences of milk that other Americans would like to prefer instead of say whole milk? Wouldn't that in a way kind of like overrule Americans' preferences of milk and in terms of like what milk really means to them, like what kind of milk really like suits best for their health, despite of the different health effects of what like traditional milk tends to have.
Yeah, I think there is definitely opportunity for that. I think it's just funny. Just a side note is that almond milk is called milk in a way because I've always considered that juice in my perspective because you can't really milk an almond, so it's just a funny thing. I think that there is definitely opportunity because there are kids that cannot digest milk, and I do think there is a lack of nutrients that they are not getting from there. And you've seen colleges embrace it with them having they've seen the almond milks, and they have also seen the whole milks and the chocolate milk, and they've had both sides of the coin. And I think that's awesome. And I think, sure, there could be some advantages, but I just wonder how much processing is done in almond milk and how natural is it? Because I come from a state where so much food is imported into our state. Like, we have winter 8 months out of the year. You can't grow fresh produce here. And so we rely on meats, dairies, and is our freshest thing. And if we start bringing in, say, almond milk, and then you replace one of your fresh alternatives, that could really impact a child's diet. And I would also maybe say, what are the studies that show maybe if a kid's on almond milk versus regular milk? Because it is natural, and you do need those natural fats in your diet. And so I think there is an avenue there. I think there is so much research that needs to be done. I'm not against it, but nor am I supportive of it, because I think that it's such a new thing that has come into this world that it's kind of a fad right now. But let's see where that fad goes, because there's so many fads that are going on in this world that, oh, you should go on a juice cleanse, but now juice cleanses are bad for you because it's too much sugar and yada, yada, yada. So it's just that we need to, before we make any drastic decisions like add that into kids' diets, we need to have research behind it.
As you know, right, milk is not the only thing that has calcium and vitamin D. Like, people can get nutrients like calcium and vitamin D like elsewhere, like fruits and vegetables, that are widely recognized, for having those kinds of nutrients alike. And I'm thinking now, after, say, navigating through various chapters of like my health journey, where I often found myself like my own diet like facing a lot of issues, because like there are times when I'm not always up to date with being healthy. Like, you just tend to like eat or consume whatever it is available on the fridge or on the shelves of the nearest supermarket. But like, would promoting, say, more fresh produce that also like tend to have nutrients like calcium and vitamin D kind of outweigh the cons of only promoting like whole milk itself, while at the same time respecting people's preferences in terms of like what they can drink for breakfast?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. There's definitely all avenues. It's just that each state is so different. Like, maybe California, you're more of a warmer climate, so maybe you embrace more of those healthier fruits and vegetables and other alternatives that have calcium, rather than North Dakota, where we're more colder, so we need those fats and stuff to keep us warm in the winter. And so I think it's just each state is so diverse and so different, from ethnicities to how people are raised, and even in their in their government themselves, of how they're structured. So I think there's just it's a big complicated mess, but I think that we're all on the same track together, is that we all want kids to eat healthy, and we want all the kids to have affordable lunches. So.
In your argument, right, you're saying that it would be best for the feds to at least respect what the states have to offer.
Oh yeah, I would argue that yes, that the federal government needs to respect it, and then because there are requirements that each school district has to follow, like sugar content and stuff like that in the milk. But if say that a school district wants whole chocolate milk in their district, that then they offer it, but then maybe they cut down on something else. Because like sometimes they offer pizza, but maybe they cut down on something like that, or maybe the dessert that's offered that day. So then it's fluctuate. But we're also seeing in rural North Dakota is that grocery prices are also higher because it takes more to import them in from the bigger metropolitan areas in North Dakota too. So it's kind of like you need to kind of take and give, because like according to the federal government right now, each kid needs to have milk in school. And so in rural North Dakota right now, because of the lack of processing that we have in North Dakota for milk, teachers are actually having to go to the grocery stores and buy gallons of milk for them, so then they could serve it at lunches. But then if you offer this whole milk incentive, it could then flip the coin of not only offering the processor that processing the milk the more flexibility of say, hey, maybe we don't have enough 1% milk at the time. Hey, you want to take some whole milk? And then the school district reshuffles some things. So it's just that we need to give more options, not only to dairy farmers, but also to the dairy community itself, is because they're under such tight restrictions of how much like weight restrictions on roads and permits, and like there's even sanitation requirements you have to follow, and all these lists of documents that they have to follow. Some farmers honestly are like, if you go back 100 years, none of these would be in place, and people would for the most part be healthy. Maybe besides the pasteurizing part, that was a huge investment in the United States, so then people were safe from milk for the most part. So.
One of the bills that you're either introducing or sponsoring or supporting, is dairy farmers to sell raw milk directly, to customers. But in so many ways, like, how would you make sure that customers don't end up being contaminated by raw milk? Because you mentioned earlier, right, that it really depends on what you really feed your cow. I'm saying, in order to produce fertile and healthy milk. But were you aware of any concerns revolving around how selling raw milk directly to customers could affect their health in a negative way, especially if it's say unpasteurized?
Yeah. So I use this analogy all the time when I'm brought up this question that, raw milk is bad for you, yada, yada, yada. So right now, if you go to a sushi restaurant, you can order raw sushi. And on the menu itself, it says, warning, this is raw sushi. You can get sick from 1, 2, 3, 4, all these illnesses. And that's the same with raw milk. It's basically a buyer beware kind of thing. And it did pass last August. And it's been a huge economic boost to the state, because we've had 15 new farms open up from it. And these are in your small town farms too. So you are having that explode of growth in bringing back that kids are in an agriculture degree at NDSU or whatever. But then when they want to come back to the family farm and open up this raw milk, and selling a gallon of raw milk sometimes can be $20. And that is huge margins when it's a gallon. And most of the time you see at the grocery stores, it's $5 to $7. And so that's a huge plus that's going for raw milk. But it's also when you get into the data of how many people are sick from raw milk, it's really interesting, actually, because more people are sick from water than raw milk. And it's just that narrative that is kind of being pushed a little bit. I don't know who's really pushing it for, say, maybe the CDC or whatever. But it's that you basically just need to be careful. If there was a sucker on the ground, I'm not going to eat it. You just need to do your due diligence hey, you got to be smart, because at the end of the day, we're not a nanny state, and nor really should we be as a government telling what people should eat and drink, because that was a huge revenue that was capping farmers off at their knees, is because you had to jump through these hoops. Basically, if you were a dairy farmer, you would have to sell to a processor, and it would have to be processed, or B, you would have to have herd shares. And now this is where it gets really complicated. It's basically that you would own a share of an animal. And basically, because you own that share of an animal, it is your right to milk it and obtain the milk. And so that was a loophole that my state had before the raw milk was legalized last year in August, is that it was your animal, so then there was no liability on the farmer. But now, since this raw milk bill has passed, a lot of farmers have been having contracts with customers of like saying, these are the benefits for raw milk. These are the possible illnesses you've gotten it. We've had 0 cases, thankfully, in North Dakota of this. I'll knock on wood right now, of any outbreak of raw milk or any like illnesses or avian flu of anything like that. So we are very thankful to have very close-knit herds around North Dakota that they keep their herd safe, they keep their herd healthy, and they also support local products in small town communities. Because another advantage that people don't know, but maybe you do since you're from California, is that you have legalized raw milk in your state, and you can actually buy it from the grocery store. And I think that is an interesting pivot, is that all the time we're being told that raw milk is horrible for you. It's it's gonna kill you and stuff like that. But then states actually have it for sale in the grocery store. So it's that narrative of, okay, if it's really that bad for you, why has it been legalized, and why is California doing just fine with having it on their shelf? So it is an awesome question that you bring up, and I love addressing it because I think I change a lot of people's narratives about it. So.
When you're talking about say based on your own approach or your own research that kids are more likely to get sick because of water, like, are you talking about contaminated water or just water, like just fresh water itself?
Well, I think you got to look at both sides of the coin of if you're going to look at water, sure, maybe the treatment plant had its issue and then the water wasn't contaminated, right? But it's also of if the person goes swimming and drinks some water, they can get sick from there. And then if it's like milk, you can possibly get sick if you drink pasteurized milk. That's always a concern. You can get sick if you don't cook meat properly. You can get sick if an Oreo maybe messed up something in the manufacturer, or a potato chip. There's always the concern that you can get sick. It's just how big and how severe is always the answer and always the question that they ask. And sure, raw milk has some concerns of health illnesses, but we also have treatments for those too. So with modernized medicine, that, hey, maybe you're sick with this virus, this thing, this maybe, and now you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, here's a shot, you'll be better in a few days. So it's of it's an awareness factor, but it's also of some people cannot digest processed milk and they want to drink raw milk. And so they are now being able to digest milk again. And so that's also a huge avenue that is also being presented to them, is because before, like if they were lactose intolerant and they would eat ice cream or cheese and it's processed, they would have diarrhea complexion and they would go crazy, or their stomachs would go crazy. But now if they're drinking raw milk, it's not processed. It's all natural. The body knows what to do with it. So then the body doesn't freak out, because it's all the time our bodies are like hypersensitive to all these chemicals. You flip over a bag of candy, a bag of Doritos, and it'll be 50 labels of chemicals. But if you would go over to the European, and you would look at the chemicals of a can of Coke or stuff like that, it would have half. And you would be like, why would it have half if it's the same amount of ingredients? And it's basically that in some instances, I've realized that sometimes I truly wonder if our food industry truly has it out best for us, and are also our healthcare system. Because you go to Mexico or other countries, and their medical care is so much lower in cost. Sure, maybe they don't have as many services and stuff like that, but it's also the same with food. You look over the back of a Doritos in Mexico or a can of Coke, and it's half, and you're like, what? Why? And it's just because of, not to say I don't know this, I haven't done my research to a certain extent, but I wonder if the chemicals in the United States, they try to lower the margins so much in the United States on the food that it's actually hurting our bodies as humans.
But and last thing before we wrap this up, the 2024 election is underway. We're already like less than 3 months away before Gen Z is expected, to make its biggest voter turnout yet, despite the polls maybe saying otherwise. From Democratic voters, preaching about Kamala being a brat, towards Gen Z Republicans on that side of the aisle, preaching towards the former president, despite, his age being put into question, even before President Biden has stepped out of the race. What would you like folks to take away as the 2024 election is coming about soon? And what is definitely something that you would look forward to seeing in the months that come about?
Right. Well, I hope that Gen Zers really turn out to vote, because you need to participate in the process. And my motto that I have adopted is that if you don't do something about it, then don't complain. If you're tired of the way that politics are right now, take it out on the election polls. Take it out on a certain candidate. If you're tired of how this country is going, or maybe you like the direction of where this country is going, vote that way. Because if you do not vote, the other demographics, your neighbors, are going to voice their opinion, and then it might not reflect your best interests. And so many people have died for us to get the right to vote. Veterans have given their lives for us to vote. It is a right for us as Americans to be given the right to vote. So we need to express our right to vote. I know so many veterans that they just cry that they have the chance to vote. And it's just such a heartfelt thing, is because they gave the ultimate sacrifice, and they basically said, yes, I will die for my country if I need to. And then when they go to the voting polls, they're like, this is what I fought for.
So hope you don't mind me raising a glass to democracy. And here in America, being the land of the free, I will pass on drinking my almond milk, my natural form of milk, what I'm saying, without pissing off the cows, in our areas. After all, it's California. Anything can happen in California, especially, almond milk pissing off cow farmers. Dawson Holle, so lovely to have you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.